Well, what a perfect time to segue into the show. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? Sorry if I got the times wrong. My apologies if by mistake I put down 11 o'clock instead of 12. I am very sorry if I did that. I meant to do it for 12 o'clock. But, well, I know, we would just need a global time. Where 4 o'clock is just 4 o'clock globally. And you figure out the light based on 4 o'clock and what it means to you. But the time, hours shouldn't change, just the light. I agree. Hello, everyone. Good morning. How you doing? Looking at myself streaming on YouTube. That's always very exciting. So I hope you guys had a good week. And in terms of the Sunday show, not too sure how long I'm going to go today. We'll see. And in terms of the chat, you can't see the chat yet because I haven't switched the windows. So let me see if I've got... Yeah, although I've changed that a little bit. So when I do hangouts and whatnot with Kevin, we usually do it at night. I'm tired. There's bad lighting I don't want to have to deal with. So I often turn off my video capture device on those shows. And then I don't need to do it for the live show because it's morning and I don't feel as rough. So there I am. Okay, now we can see you guys. And we can see the chat, which is fantastic. And yeah, I'm wearing, very unusual for me to wear like animal patterned things at all. But in this case, it's the coziest, warmest, softest, most cuddly thing ever. The earth is large and stupidly round. Yes, thanks you guys. That's perfect. So yeah, now you guys can see your chat. And also the magic end stream button that controls everything. Because really that's what's making the show work right there. This little button. Although, to be fair, I have to hit it twice in order for it to work. But, hello, happy Sunday, everyone. There are two main things I would like to talk with you about today. The first being the impeachment stuff. I want to kind of wrap up the impeachment issue and think about it a bit more globally and some discussions about implications. And then also, too, I want to react. Maybe I should do this first. Because I did put constitutional crisis, but... You know, you've got to have a little bit of drama in order to get the peoples in the chairs, bums on seats. No, so I guess one, I can probably do a tab. It's not that big of a deal, to be honest. If I'm completely honest, I'm not so worried about it. But Kevin and I did do a stream last night. And on that stream, we discussed the problem of... the Joe Rogan problem that came up last week, or this last week with Bernie Sanders, and Kevin, is openly supportive of Sanders. It's his preferred candidate. He doesn't get to vote because obviously he's not American, can't do anything about that. But and of course that's not too unusual with Europeans. Europeans come from a background of social democracy, so they don't see Bernie as being that controversial or far to the left, and because they don't live in America, they don't actually interact with Americans offline. So I think if Europeans had more interactions with your average sort of rural Americans, I guess what you're talking about is white people, especially in rural areas like Idaho and Oklahoma, you'd see very quickly that there are huge obstacles to selling socialism in America. We have a history hostile to communism, unlike Europe. I mean, okay, yeah, you had the fascists going after the communists, I'll grant you that. But in places, communism was tolerated. There are still communist parties, and there just aren't in the States. People have been socialized to be very suspicious of that stuff, and so to just come out and say I'm a socialist, you're already creating barriers. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about, because ultimately I don't really think that that's the problem. So Kevin and I did this happy hour, and we essentially agreed that the problem was, and actually Kevin kind of misleads in the title, but the problem wasn't so much that Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders. The problem was that Bernie Sanders signal boosted Joe Rogan. And last night, I don't really like Joe Rogan. I'm not kind of happy. I forgot that he exists. Yeah. And, if I could just summarize for those of you who didn't check out the show, I see it's got 824. Give it a day or two. It'll get to 1,000. But essentially what our point is that it doesn't look good to your base, to your allies, to the people that you say you share a progressive set of values with, if as soon as a bulk of edgelord guys from the internet take a mildly flirtatious passing interest, that you would drop those people like a ton of bricks and go chasing after these edgelord, essentially white people votes, and especially white guys, white men's votes, independent/conservative/libertarian men, and privileging those people's political orientations above those of your core base. Yeah, there is a Communist Party in the United States. I just don't think, it doesn't, it might run in places like New York and California. And it might even get some people in on the local councils or the city councils. I don't doubt that. But your average American is socialized to be hostile to communism. Just the name of it, not even understanding the idea of it. Sadly, that's the world we live in. All right, so essentially it was, the message was, don't stab your allies in the back chasing white edgelords, guys who aren't reliable, guys who might not be there for you in the general, people who will be abusive to your base rather than respectful and inclusive. And I probably maybe should have looked for this earlier, but I went last night because someone on Twitter mentioned Peter Coffin's latest video. And Kevin didn't want to discuss it because he agrees with Peter from time to time. And as you can see, I got just about almost through the entire thing. And this video it's such a straw man argument, at least in terms of where I am coming from. So in the many Peters, Joe Rogan, Bernie Sanders, and essentialism, Peter Coffin does a couple embarrassing things. So first of all, he completely straw mans the entire argument. Oh, I see that because of where I put myself in the screen, I'm covering up Peter's face. So let me go to my screen here and see if I can adjust where I'm sat. Where should I sit? Should I sit in the bottom corner? I think so. I think I'm gonna. What am I gonna do, peoples? As we transition, move my interface around on the fly. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move down this window a little bit, and then tuck myself in the bottom so that I can see you, but I can still see me, and you can see me too. Yeah, that'll work. Oh, I think I did that. You guys can watch me do that live. How exciting! How exciting for you. I thought I was going to have to transition to that again, but I didn't have to. All I had to do was do it live. There we go. Right. I think that looks about right. Rightsies now. That seems better. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not, ideally I would probably maybe, for the aesthetic on this, just for consistency. Oh, wrong one. I think what I might do, is that locked into place? You guys don't really care, do you? Like, Christy, it doesn't matter. It's not that important. Just freaking, get your show on the road. Just do your show. Where's display? No, that's display capture too. I'm sorry. I'm annoyed now. The aesthetic, the balance doesn't work for me. I have to do this. I have to do it. Okay. Now I feel better. Otherwise, it's unbalanced, and I can't handle that at all. All right. So now that we've got everything tucked up where it needs to be, the many Peters video. So the first problem is that he just strawmans the argument of the objectors or the people who are criticizing it, and he strawmans it by only framing it as people are upset with Joe Rogan for endorsing Bernie. So the framing is, the problem is that Joe Rogan had an opinion, and the reason why Joe Rogan having an opinion is bad about Sanders is because he holds really noxious views. I think that's pretty much it. But again, that's misleading. That's not being honest. That is not charitably representing your opponent's critique so that you can offer a very robust critique. Because by setting things up as, I guess, neoliberal centrist shills and allies who lack class consciousness, in Peter's worldview, are angry about the Joe Rogan thing because he has bad opinions, and we are very intolerant, and we're not thinking strategically for not embracing these bigoted holding people, and not bringing them into the tent before we start to talk to them about their bigotry. And he gets quite excited. He mentions specifically white working class. He might not say white, but it's code when you look at who Joe Rogan actually attracts as an audience. It's anti-white identity politics. It's hypermasculinity, right? So we're not talking about a cross section of the left when it comes to his audience. It skews, I'm sure, libertarian. It skews to men, and it skews white. It's also global. So as people pointed out, Joe Rogan has 5 million subscribers on Twitter. Yeah, but I'm pretty confident that he gets lots of listeners in Canada, in the UK, and Australia, and other English-speaking places, as well as non-English-speaking places. So let's say 20% of that. So now you're down to 4 million. Well, you got 4 million people spread up across a country of 330 million, and you really think that 4 million votes, even if you concentrated 4 million votes in 4 states, depending on what the states were, I don't think there's like a million Californian Joe Rogan listeners. That's fine, but there's like 50-some million people in California. They're not going to swing an election. So chasing all of these racists, chasing all of these independent white guys who have bigoted views, because that's their idea. That's Peter's idea of expanding the tent. It seems like his aim in broadening out the coalition is not to try to bring people in who are already part of the coalition. It's to flood the Democratic base with a bunch of non-leftist, bigoted, white, mostly men, who aren't interested in progressivism, who aren't interested in human rights, who are basically anti-tax, anti-corporation populists, who don't have a sense of a connection to the obligations of a society to its individual members. They're more like, down with corporations, we got to reform the tax system, but then just like leave me alone and I want to be a bigot. So, very disappointed with Peter's straw manning, and I got, to about 10 minutes into it, and he never actually raised the objection that everyone that I've seen on Twitter all over the place. I've never seen him, so to the point of here, and you can even put on the closed captions, and he just goes on and on and on about straw manning. This argument that you people on the left need to be more tolerant of bigots, and if you don't let bigots in, how can we ever convert them? And we should not have standards and purity tests to stop people from coming in because we really need these white guys. We can't, it's not enough to expand the base with the existing Democratic base, which is, energizing more people in the Black community to register and vote, because that is our base. No. What we have to do is go out and chase these vote every once in a while, not registered as a Democrat, no history of voting for Democrats, libertarian white guys. And it's disappointing. It's wrong. And it's going to produce problems inside the Sanders coalition, ultimately. And we've already had, I know that there were, I was going to bring it up, Sanders supporters, Facebook, I think that should probably be enough. Yes. All right, so you get these edgelords into your community. You get people in who troll and use bigoted language and harass people and try to bully and silence people. Surprise, surprise. that spreads everywhere, and it becomes its own ethos, especially when the candidate doesn't squash it. So this was reported the other day, 2 days ago, in the Washington Post. And it says, a Democrat in Michigan scrolled through a surge of nasty Facebook memes about Senator Elizabeth Warren last week before fixing on one that captured his growing dislike of the candidate. It depicted her smiling face as a mask. Behind it was Hillary Clinton. Matt Walters, 64, a retired factory worker and supporter of Bernie Sanders, shared the image onward to 8 Facebook groups and tens of thousands of potential eyeballs with a few taps on his smartphone, using a popular new mass posting technique that allows ordinary Americans to operate with rapid-fire speed, reminiscent of Russian bots and trolls in 2016. In that small way, Walters contributed to a massive wave of hostile memes about Sanders' Democratic rivals that both reflects the rising divisiveness in the party's nominating contest and, in the view of social media experts, exacerbates it. I'd call it a force multiplier, Walters, a one-time union activist, said of Facebook. The volume and viciousness of the memes portraying Warren as a snake, a backstabber, a liar, reflect how Facebook identifies and rewards emotionally charged content to generate reactions from its billions of users. And can I just point out, it's an old white guy who is hating on women. This is what I see as the quintessential Sanders supporter. I know that there are a lot of people I like and I'm friends with who are not like that, but that is what I see. I see a bunch of bigoted white guys who don't care about identity politics because they only care about their own pocketbooks. And that's not class consciousness. That's self-interest. And wanting to make more money while being willing to throw everybody else under the bus is not being left. It's being selfish. That's not economic transformation. That's just white guys wanting to put more money in their pocket while screwing over the rest of us. Go down here. Anything else? Since the beginning of 2019, nearly 3,000 Facebook pages supporting Sanders have generated more than 290 million interactions, meaning shares, likes, or other user actions, according to an analysis by Trevor Davis, a research professor at Livingston's Institute. For contrast, about 350 pages devoted to former Vice President Joe Biden have generated 9 million interactions. Nearly 300 pro-Warren pages come in at under 20 million interactions. So I think what also is problematic, and then they talk about how the structure of Facebook, where you can share to multiple groups at the same time, is driving these kinds of behaviors. So it's a technology issue as well as a personal issue. But I think more importantly, this is exactly the kind of thing, when I talk about Bernie Sanders not being a Democrat and not caring about the Democratic Party and not wanting to build a structure and to continue the structure that we've been working on. Bringing in these kinds of people who engage in this kind of behavior and just viciously tear down people who have been in the party, people who have worked for the party, who stayed registered Democrats even when they didn't win the primary. He's weaponizing this sort of divisive hate to bring it down from within. So he's really defanging the Democratic Party and turning it into a place that is very welcoming to bigoted, not Democratic Party member white guys. It's, this is going to be, I know people are not going to like this, but there are a lot of parallels that people have pointed out between what Sanders is doing to the Democratic Party and what Trump did to the Republican Party. I don't think that it's equivalent in terms of effect, because Trump developed a cult of personality that consumed the Democratic Party. And there are a lot of people still who don't like Bernie and who resist Bernie. So, and the other thing too that he's got a problem with is right now his supporters, so their tactic is, and I can tell you from being on the receiving side of it, is they find out who you support and then they just flood you with attacks destroying your... TJ Kirk responded to me. Why did TJ Kirk, what did he respond to? I have no idea. Who cares what TJ Kirk thinks? He's literally incapable of putting together a coherent sentence that has a reference linked to reality when it comes to analysis, I find. Where was I before that? I think it has to do, it was just creating a hostile space. Yeah, so they just tear down your tear down your candidate, tear down your candidate, and you as well, and they insult you, and they just try to emotionally destroy you. Sorry, there's the camera. They try to emotionally destroy you. That's what Sanders people do, and then when your candidate gets out, they move on like a hive like mind to the next one. So they just go from candidate supporters to candidate supporters, demeaning them, insulting them, just being awful to them. The one thing that I think you're going to find that the Warren supporters and the Harris supporters and the Castro supporters and everyone else is going to come together. He called me a Democratic loyalist. Yeah, I guess, when you have a two-party system, it's important to have a party that's functioning. Oh, like I'm going to be lectured to about internal consistency of positions by TJ Kirk. Yeah, exactly. So, Sanders supporters, by this kind of these really vicious attacks, by going after people personally, they just alienate everybody else inside the party. And I think what they think is that if they just crush everybody into silence, if they can squash anyone who objects to Bernie, yeah, who criticizes him, then silence means they have no arguments. And when they silence people, then they can ride roughshod over them. And that those people, because he'll be the Democratic nominee, won't have a choice. And they will just have to vote for Sanders. And then they can impose their revolution on the world, I guess. The problem with that is, if everybody in the party except for his base of like 25 or 30% hate the nominee and are unmotivated and feel alienated and are reluctant to support the candidate, they're not going to knock on doors. They're not going to make phone calls. They're not going to be out there defending him and pushing for him. And they don't have to love him just because he's the nominee. We saw how the Sanders people kicked and screamed all the way to Election Day about Clinton. Sanders has got to start building a coalition with people inside the party instead of trying to attract not Democrats, people like TJ Kirk. And I actually, this is great. This is actually a perfect analogy. So, the Democratic campaigns like Biden and Warren and Klobuchar, they are trying to attract my vote because I'm officially undecided now. And this is also great. Because if you ever get into a fight with a burner, just tell them you're undecided. Lie to them. Doesn't matter. They don't care about you, so you don't have to care about them. And because if you tell them that you support a candidate, they just pull out their list of, here's why your candidate is evil and you're an evil person for supporting them. And the only way to not be evil is to support my candidates, because I have the only good candidate, and you're a terrible person unless you support my candidate. And it doesn't matter if you're a bigot, as long as you support my candidate, you're an okay person. And so with that, so that's what... That is, so getting back to this. So Biden, Warren, Klobuchar, Buttigieg, they are looking for people like me, people who are longtime party members, who give money to candidates, who are willing to speak up in defense and support of candidates, and who have some legitimacy, right? A track record, who understands the Democratic Party and who understands its strengths and its failings, but also is invested into having something that is a bulwark against Republican unity. The white supremacy that brings them together. TJ Kirk is a self-serving jerk who said he would vote for Trump on a bet because he wanted to win a bet. So if TJ Kirk is going to call me a Democratic loyalist, I'll call him a Trump loyalist because he is loyal to Trump if it will put money in his pocket. I don't really care that TJ Kirk has a criticism of me. He's not a leftist. He's not a progressive. He doesn't have a good internal moral core, and he has no reasoning ability and no research ability. He's an angry, ignorant, bigoted white man who lives in his little bubble of white male privilege, who thinks he can lecture people by shouting at them, when all he does is show what a poor reasoner and a poor human being he is. So if DJ Kirk is calling me a Democratic loyalist, for me, that's a compliment, because if there's one person I would never want to be a spokesperson for the Democratic Party, it would be somebody like TJ Kirk. Definitely not. Go away. And you can take your edgelords with you. because I would rather have trans people feel safe in the Democratic Party. I would rather have people of color feel respected and to be part of the conversation and to be on stage and to be leading the party because they are such a big part of it. I want, LGBTQIA people to come in and not feel like they are going to be questioned or insulted or demeaned. Or we can talk about shoe on head, telling people who disagree about Bernie that, it's going to be so great when we have Medicare for all because then you can get the mental health services you need. Really? So you're going to use mental health issues, issues, and problems or whatever, conditions, I think is the word I'm looking for. And you're going to use that to mock people. That shows what a progressive you are on healthcare, I guess. That you're going to use it to demean people with mental illnesses in order to point score. I don't want June in the Democratic Party. I don't want TJ Kirk in the Democratic Party because they're bigoted jerks. They're awful. So why would I want them in the party? We can get the votes. We've won elections before without June and without TJ Kirk and without Russian interference and without GOP voter suppression. So you take away Russian interference in voter suppression in the state of Wisconsin. You've already got that for Clinton last time around. We don't need to debase ourselves by competing with Trump for the racist, bigoted voter base. We have allies and ally groups that we can motivate that already share our values and bring and activate people who already share our values than going out and selling out our principles in order to attract people who will maybe vote for your candidate in the primary and then turn around and vote for Trump in the general. All right. So I love Sanders, but I hated the snake emojis. Yeah, this is it too. I mean, honestly, I get this. Like, I can see the division now. I saw Thomas Smith trying to talk down his fellow Berner supporters. I've heard Kevin do it. I've seen Chris Ciosity doing it. I know, in 2016, there was a whole lot of the Bernie bros denialism. There was the idea that Bernie bros really didn't exist. It was just Clinton supporters who were being hypersensitive. It was Clinton supporters who couldn't take critiques. I think you guys are seeing, and I think more and more people are seeing now. Maybe that's because, honestly, Clinton didn't really fire back at Sanders. She didn't do a ton of opposition research and just trash his opinion or trash his reputation in the media. And we're seeing that now. Right? We're seeing the problems of sorry, I lost my train of thought because I saw your leftist Zionist political ideology. What Zionist? I don't even know what you mean about Zionist. I've not talked about Israel at all, Samuel. But, go ahead and be make up lies. We'll all laugh at you. This is going to be hilarious. Come on, Samuel, bring it. And the whole thing about the misogyny associated with the attacks on on Warren. You could also see it with Harris as well. And there's a divide between Bernie Sanders supporters who aren't jerks. Basically, they don't think that the tactic to win to win the primary is to psychologically break down your opponent's supporters. They actually think that, you should talk to people and have conversations and try to win them over. And then there are the burners who will basically, again, demonize you and try to emotionally crush you, insult you, gaslight you, and break you down into supporting their candidate. And it's just not good. It's not going to help him. All right, so I think that is about it. I think we're on that one. I guess, did they take away live chat, top chat now? Because live chat, top chat was always the stupidest thing. James Kootless, thank you so much for the $2. Very much appreciate it. You didn't say anything, though. So if you shout something out, I can also give you something back. Oh, that reminds me, I need to do the podcast. I've got 2 that I need to sort out. Damn it. Homework. All right, that went way longer. That went super way longer than I meant for it to go. But I think it was an important conversation. I also find it hilarious that I'm gonna be proud. I'll wear it as a badge that DJ Kirk called me a Democratic Party loyalist, because he's like, again, dirtbag. I can't think of things more exciting than to be criticized by TJ Kirk, because he's got so many bad takes that if I'm on the wrong side of him, I gotta be right. If agreeing with TJ is right, then I gotta be wrong. All right. Where are we now? Oh, I think we're going to talk a little bit about impeachment, but honestly, folkies, my peoples, I think I need to top up on my coffee. Can you see? Yeah, you can see me. I've got, oh my gosh, there's hardly any left. I think what we'll do is, let's take a fiver after 30 minutes. I was kind of riffing. I had not even talked about what I'd planned to talk about so far. I always think, what am I going to do on the show for 2 hours? There's no way I can fill 2 hours. And then I start talking and I realize I can talk for a long time. So I know it's only been a half an hour, but I've had 3 cups of coffee earlier. I need to stretch my legs. I need to fill up on coffee. I need to get some hydration in me. So let's take a 5 minutes. I don't know, as long as I need. How about that? We'll take as long as I need. And then we'll come back. I will go ahead and put on the jazzy music for you guys. And glad I dropped in. It was good to hear what you had to say. Oh, thanks, James. Okay, before I'll leave, I'll just say this too. So, in addition to looking at, on the whole sexism thing, in addition to looking at the Peter Coffin's disappointing straw man video that doesn't deal with the actual arguments, but instead virtue signals by talking about, oh, it's really important we reach out to people. No one's saying don't reach out to people. What they're saying is Sanders shouldn't elevate bigots. So get the argument straight. Sorry, I already said that once. Right? But just on this, I went to Natalie in the chat, oftentimes, Kirk, was tweeted out on Twitter that we were getting some hate in the chat. And, sorry, not the chat, in the comments from our video, from our show last night. The chat was fine. I think people in the chat were actually there and listening to us, and so they could hear what we had to say and react in real time. But several people came into Kevin's comments. And it was interesting that during the show, I initially deferred to Kevin first, because as the Bernie supporter, I thought it would be people who were Bernie supporters would listen to his critique with a more open mind, because they know he also supports Bernie. Whereas if I said it first, they would go, oh, Christie's just being a hater. So if you remember, I actually tried to get Kevin to always go first, and he refused at one point. But when you go into the comments on his video, which I can't get to now for some reason, it's yes. So a highly critical, giving you a thumbs up on that comment. It's interesting that the criticisms in Kevin's chat, I don't want to go through all of them, but they are mostly of me, and they tend to, Christy knows her stuff when it comes to a lot of subjects, but this is one topic I cannot vibe with her on. The attitude she tends toward isn't conducive to changing anything. I literally echoed Kevin's points. How can you sit there and say that my attitude is not conducive when most of the time I was agreeing with someone who supports Sanders? And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just feel like there is undeniable sexism that is a huge problem in the Sanders base. And they will put it down to, no, it's not that I don't like this woman. I don't like this woman because she's a neoliberal shill. And yet they don't go after men with the same viciousness. They just don't go after, say, Buttigieg. And you can say, oh, he goes after Biden on stuff, but he doesn't go after Biden. They don't go after Biden with snake emojis. Or come in the way they kind of would slide into DMs and spread lies about Kamala Harris. So, oh yeah, the Sargon-Vosh debate. That's right. Thank you for reminding me about that, Lonely Wolf. I wanted to see that. I meant to, but I think I actually ended up doing a show. We did a show instead. How long did it go? Oh my gosh, in 2 hours? No emotion allowed. Yeah, be a robot. So Lonely Wolf, as long as you're in the stream, give us a little, like, was it better? Was it more well organized? Can you just give us a little too long didn't watch while you get a coffee? Ended up doing a Slurpee run. Okay. Well, all right. So let's do that. Let's do a Slurpee run. I will get do my coffee thing, and Lonely Wolf, if you can give us a little summary, we'll come back. I'll look with anticipation for that. Okay. So 5 minutes. I said I was going to do this ages ago. I'm really going to do it now. I'm going to turn up the music again so that we can all hear it. Yeah. Oh, I love blues music. All right, guys. See you in 5. Does anyone else love blues as much as I do? Alright, let's turn this down. There we go. Alright. Hey, I'm back! How was your break, everyone? I hope it was good. Mine was. I got fresh coffee. Actually, I warmed up my old coffee by pouring in fresh coffee, because I didn't want to throw away the old. But on the other hand, it needed to be warmed up, so... You know what doesn't work? That damn coffee thing just dripped. That's alright. I'll get coffee on me. I'll hot belly have coffee on me. Well, anyway, guys, let's see. There was a question in the chat I saw before we started to leave, and I want to address it. I actually think it's really important. And you can take my opinion or not. That's fine, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to give it. All right. So, Mablek says, we call Pete a rat and Warren a snake. Not sure what the problem is. The problem is it's dehumanizing. And it also, for me, so the main thing is you're essentializing them as subhuman, right? You're dehumanizing them by comparing them to an animal as opposed to making an argument about one of their policy statements. The other problem I have with that is that, rats, snakes, those are terms that people have used to dehumanize people in fascist regimes, right? So the problem with attacking the person and not the argument is that you're dehumanizing and demeaning them as a person as opposed to making a policy critique. And we don't build our party by dehumanizing people. We don't build our party by dehumanizing people with whom we disagree. And this is why it's actually important to think about the Democratic Party as a unifying force. Just like with a football team, you might have different strategies or different ideas about how to win as a team. But the thing is that in a team setting like that, you're meant to put it's the party that wins, not the person, right? You're all pulling together so that your team wins, your party wins, so that you can achieve a greater vision. And by dividing people and pushing them pushing them out and pushing them down, you're not expanding the policy range. You are just sort of mentally abusing people into submission. And that's not a way to bring about a revolution or a change. So my problem with Bernie is, one, on the fact that he keeps quitting the Democratic Party, and I don't trust him to lead it. He could have stuck around after 2016 to do internal reforms, and he didn't. He walked away and he rejected the party, and then he came back when he wanted to run it for president again. I don't think he's committed to the party. I don't think he's shown a track record. The other thing that I have a problem with is that he claims he's a social democrat. I'm sorry, correct myself. He claims he's a democratic socialist, but all his policies are social democracy. All his policies are pro-capitalist. It's about wages, changing wages, and okay, maybe one of them has to do with eliminating insurance companies, and people don't like that policy. So he's not even economically consistent in terms of his own socialist agenda. Free college, paying off college debt, that's not going to transform the structures of capitalism. That's just transferring money. That doesn't fix the problem. So anyway, have policy debates with people. But when you just dehumanize Elizabeth Warren, when you dehumanize Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Joe Biden, you're not strengthening our party, you're dividing it. And people who do that, well, when you don't care about the Democratic Party and you don't care about it as a counter to the Republican Party, then, as Shuan had said, basically blowing it up from the inside, completely destroying it as it currently exists is a goal. How do you win with a party that's completely destroyed? You don't. So ultimately, June is just promoting one party rule by the Republican white supremacists. So, anyway, so that's my, I don't know what happened with Samuel there, but it seems to be a bit trollish. So Mablek, that's why it's the dehumanization. Just have policy debates with people, but stop calling people names because they support a candidate who is also interested in the same views you are. You call people neoliberal shills or corporate shills or sellouts or centrists or whatever else, they're just not going to respect anything you have to say. And all I see is as we get farther along in the primary, now that Bernie is at the top of he's finally crested. Everyone's had their turn at the top for a while. I guess it wasn't Biden, but Warren was up for a while, and Buttigieg was up for a while, and Biden was up for a while, and now Sanders finally, after this entire campaign, finally pulls into first, and he's going to get dragged all over creation from it. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Let's talk about the Vosh-Sargon thing since I've got that up. A tenor. Is that HK doing a good job on the... thanks for that, HK. What'd you got? Have a good day. Aw, come on, bring it in. I'm going to give you a hug. E-hug. All right. Thanks for that, HK. Do appreciate it very much. And I will get on with doing the podcast because I know I'm a little bit behind on that. Okay, so I did ask Lonely Wolf to give us a Too Long Didn't Read, and I'm not going to not respect your work and read it out. So, we got a bunch of stuff deleted by Samuels there. Right. I generally, like, if people aren't being insultive, I'll ask questions. So I just think it's funny that he mentioned Zionism when I don't think I've ever publicly given my opinion on the Israel-Palestine situation, but I'm certainly not a Zionist. I believe in the territorial integrity of the state of Israel, but I equally think that the Palestinians need territorial integrity for their self and their sovereignty and their self-government. So I don't know how that's Zionist. All right. Yeah, the downside of watching me live is you can't skip over the break. Very, very, very true. Poor Lonely Wolf fell asleep during the debate. That's not a good sign. 3 hours. It was better. Vosh was better prepared. Yeah. The moderator was more balanced. That's good. And HK, yeah, I think another debate between those two already. I think Vosh really felt his ass being smacked publicly on that and wanted to save face. I'll go also and watch it and see if it's any better, but as has been already previewed in the chat, time limits and actually speaking to the question doesn't seem to be the strong point with these guys. Still pretty painful though, said Striped Mongoose, even with better moderators. I lost interest. It was two men evading the talking points. You need a debate with strict timing, no interruptions, and demands to answer the question. Yeah, I think that's the problem. Again, I'll give a prediction based on what I've seen from Vosh before. So I know how Carl operates. Carl he's most comfortable attacking other people's points because he doesn't have a depth of knowledge. So when you don't know what you're talking about, when you aren't well informed and you don't have the facts to hand, which Carl never does. Carl's incredibly unread, lazy, and just does not make any intellectual effort on par of what would be required with somebody you'd think would want to be on camera. So because Carl is intellectually lazy and makes no effort, it's easier for him to just try to find things to pick apart in your argument. And if someone is quite full of themselves and they like to hear the sound of their own voice, no, fair enough. I do a 2-hour show every week without really a pause. So, present company included. I've learned though, I've seen this tactic, so I don't do this. Carl will answer a question with a question. And that way he doesn't have to give a specific response. And especially when you've got an egotist who loves to hear the sound of their own voice, answering a question with a question just gives Carl more opportunities. When they start to talk, it gives him more opportunities to find fault with their, I should say, points. And then he'll just go on the attack again. So this is what he does. It's sort of like a rope-a-dope. It's make a comment to answer a question that isn't particularly clear and doesn't have many sources or any source that he's aware of. It's just an opinion. And then as soon as he can, shift it to a question so that he gets his opponent talking so he can go on the attack. I would predict that Vosh has not learned to handle that. And that is the thing that when Kevin, and this is why Carl won't come on and debate with me anymore, because I ask him very narrow, short, focused questions, and then I try to go into depth on his understanding of that topic. And he can't handle that in examination. He can't actually justify. I mean, look at his video on the impeachment. He's literally just repeating Fox News talking points. And he made no effort to look at any of the other information. He looked at one memo. People had already pointed out the things that he needed to look for. He repeated what other people said and made no further inquiries on his own. He's not intellectually interested, engaged, curious. He wants to get paid for giving his opinion. His uninformed opinion, his bigoted opinion. He wants to spread his bigotry and get paid for it. So with a situation like that, in that situation, you have to always work on boxing Carl in. Yes or no. And don't do like a false dichotomy. Just be very clear. Like, how many Justice Democrats were elected, Carl? Can you name them? You know, if he's going to be making a point and his entire premise rests on his understanding of that concept or that fact being accurate, just unpack some of his premises. And he's immediately exposed. So we'll see. I mean, again, I'm going to kind of predict that part of the problem was, you know what, I'm not even going to try to use the thing, this bitty here on my coffee mug thing, because it's not working. So I'm just going to pour it out like it's a pitcher. There we go. That's safer. I don't know Vosh well enough to know what his tactics problems are. But again, that's the number one. There's a lot of ways to actually handle Carl in a debate. I think we talked about it the last time Kevin and I talked about it the last time Vosh and Carl debate. I don't know if he listened to me, but they're having interacted with him a couple times now. Yeah, you need a single question. You need to be able to call for references. Like, just look that up or show me that, or I can show you my source, whatever else. And you need a time limit, and you need to not answer the questions he poses to you until he answers the question you pose to him. Answering a question with a question is not an answer. And don't take that bait. Was the moderator V, and was he sitting on, what is that? Shoes a lap. Like Bernie Bros promote Joe, TERFs promote Carl. I'm not gonna, yeah, I mean, they're like, TERFs would love Carl. He's a bigot. So, yeah, I mean, he's noxious in his views. I have no doubt whatsoever that TERFs would side with him on that. I can't stand Sargon, so have a good day. Okay, we're not going to watch it, by the way. We're just talking about it. Without having watched it, I'm just going to make some predictions about what I think might be the problem. Carl is slimy and wiggly, like a nauseum of Japanese mythology. Or a Nazum. Nazuma. Wording is hard for me. I can't pronounce things. Yeah. This is very true. Carl will say, "Oh, I'm asking a question," or he'll use a lot of half information, partial truth, weaved in with his conspiracy theories or ignorance, and he can't take a position because he doesn't understand his own positions a lot of the time. Like Tim Pool. Tim Pool doesn't give opinions; he just reacts. He doesn't think; he emotes. Carl's the same way. They're a rhetoric. They're a propaganda outlet. They're not a fact-finding source. I went on a debate show with rigid rules. It's very difficult. My job was to argue that sex robots are not good for society. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, so I don't know if you guys are aware, but the Cognitive Society is toying with this idea of getting sort of like a YouTube debate society going, where people on the left would come and actually debate using debate rules. Not this sort of stupid chud version, this hyper masculine debate me bro format where guys just sit on a line with no particular question, no time frame, no rules, nothing coherent, and just shout at each other for a couple hours. It's like a TJ Kirk, drunken peasants. Just self-important, undereducated, usually conservative or libertarian-leaning white guys thinking that their uninformed opinion is just the most interesting and hot thing the world has to know about. But instead actually do a proper debate and have, with all of those structures, and to argue a position maybe you don't agree with. So yeah, sex robots are not good for society. That would be a challenging one. I'm not saying I think we need to make tons of sex robots in order to fix all the problems of society, but I think for me at least, the sex robots are not good for society could possibly devolve into some really problematic appeals to moral goods. I guess if so, Lonely Wolf, as long as you put it up there, now I'm speculating. I never did get to impeachment. We'll get to that. We'll get to that for the rest of the show then. I'll make a note. Impeachment stuff starts at 1 hour 35 or something. But I would probably make the argument in terms of sex robots not being good for society. Not that I don't think that necessarily, but what I could say is, I don't know what argument you made, but that interacting with artificial intelligences and beings doesn't help us connect on an emotional level with human beings. And so by using an artificial replacement for sex, we are becoming less adept at human intimacy and human connection. And that, so maybe I would go down that route with more of less about the sex and more about the human connection and the importance of actually being understood and validated and supported and all those things as a psychological benefit of intimacy. Right. Wanting Carl to provide substance for his arguments, don't you know he doesn't have time for that? Too many arguments and lies to spread. Sib, you're not wrong. Sib Wolf, you are so not wrong. All right, so we got there. Sex bots are lame. There's the debate answered. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting. I can only do, Lonely Wolf writes, I can only do it when it is about a topic that I don't have a strong opinion about. Yeah. DNF fan says, internet blood sports? No. This would be, so when Cog talked to me about it, he was thinking, I think, along the lines of quite traditional debate topics like, getting Kevin on to argue in favor of the death penalty, or getting, and getting me on to debate against it. But I kind of felt like everyone has seen those debates before, so I was trying to get him to get questions like, Sargon of Akkad is the second worst YouTuber on YouTube, and then one person can say, yes, he is the second worst YouTuber because this person is the first, and another person can say, no, I disagree, he is not the second worst YouTuber, he's the third worst, or whatever else. But that might get pulled up for bullying now these days by YouTube, so who knows if we could do that. Sex bots are capitalist wet dream of economic disadvantage of the sex worker. JMM, that is actually a really good argument. It's honest. No, I'm going to tip my cap. I got to tip my cap to that. That is actually like a good economic critique. You could say in some ways that's both a Marxist perhaps and also a feminist critique. Insofar as for people who are like myself, who thinks sex work is a perfectly legitimate source of revenue for those people who choose to go into those fields and want to and are happy in their career choices and just want to be safe and healthy in their workplaces like anybody else. Okay. And yeah, it's a form of automation, isn't it? It's like, it's no different from the self-checkouts at the grocery store or the self-ordering things at McDonald's now. You're automizing, automizing? No. Autonomizing? No. You're automating. That's the word. You're automating a service provision. So yeah. I actually think if I was going to have to argue that point in a debate, I'm going to steal that one. Because in a formal debate structure, that would be good. I said that when you were talking about the Chud version of debates. Which one? Oh, internet blood sports. Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. But no, it's okay. It gave me a chance to kind of plug Cog's idea. It probably, in all honesty, won't happen until the summer. I get the sense that his master's program is sucking all the time and life out of him. So when I do have a chance to chat with him. So, oh, okay. What is Sib Wolf says, I know, and I say that as a former Carl fan. That's okay. It's all right. Don't be ashamed. You've grown and moved on. It's okay. Lonely Wolf, I argue that sexual frustration and awkwardness is natural and feeds our culture via comedy. This is subverted by technology. Without sexual frustration, very little art. Oh, that's an interesting take. All right. So why don't I talk a little bit about impeachment? What time is it anyway? 1 o'clock. Here I thought I was going to struggle to go for an hour. Not only did I not have a problem waffling on for an hour, I haven't even talked to the main issue on the subject of the Hangout title. Did I mention I love coffee? I love coffee. I love coffee. Okay. Well, on the impeachment thing, I don't know. You guys have heard me waffle on this a lot, perhaps, if you've been on the shows before or listened to me on the happy hours. I think I can just get rid of this. I can't think of anything else I need that way wise. But what I can do maybe is I'll change the window slightly. Yeah. All right. I mentioned this in a little bit in the last happy hour. This notion of a constitutional crisis. And at least for me, I kind of had this, I think, really naive perception of what it would be like to live in Nazi Germany when the Nazis were coming to power. And I had this idea that somehow there would be, like this difference in the way that you could tell when you'd slid into fascism, that there would be some sort of line in real time that as it was being stepped over, you would say, oh my gosh, this is where things start to get really bad. And the Trump administration has made me realize that is not the case at all. We only know when the diagnosis has become, malignant, after it's become malignant. And I am very concerned about going forward the quality of our constitutional republic. So let me start a little bit at the beginning of this thought process, because I might be wandering otherwise. All right, let me, I'm trying to think. Yeah, let's do this. I guess, well, no, then you can't really see me. All right. I'll change up this. I'll change this up a little bit so that I am a bit on the bigger side, so that you can at least see me. I'll put myself really big in the boom. How nice. And I'll stick the fireplace now down. I'll change that too. I've said this before, that growing up, the Constitution, our democratic republic, our democracy, our progression toward ever expanding human and civil rights felt very solid to me. It felt it's perhaps a slightly different, thing to describe in terms of social constructionism. But let me do a parallel for people who may not know about the dysphoria I'm trying to account for here. Think about the education system in your country. Primary, secondary, post-secondary. There's a whole system of laid out requirements, criteria, qualifications for people who want to teach. Everyone sort of understands what the rules are, what the minimum requirement is, what the process is, and how it all functions. Now imagine that sort of like the entire base of your educational system was being put at risk. That instead of teaching people facts, There was a massive takeover, and it was being, like increasingly people were being taught creationist propaganda, not just in the science classroom, but everywhere. It was being infiltrating all the arts and literature, even maths. And this, complete lie was infiltrating your education system, and people were starting to abandon it and walk away from it without there really being an alternative. They just disassociating with it. That's what it feels like for our constitutional freedoms. Not the government per se. I mean, the governments as an institution made up of people will continue to run, but what's happening is the rules that are guiding people's behaviors and the outcomes are being tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked with no counter. With the only remedy being waiting 4 years and then working on changing the person holding office with a valid election, if you can trust the election process, which they are also undermining. And this groundlessness, this ephemeral sense of freedom just disappearing in front of my eyes is very unsettling. And I feel that we should have people out in the streets and protesting, with our hair on fire almost, not physically or realistic or literally, but metaphorically, saying our republic is on fire, our constitution is being burned down. And that is what Adam Schiff was giving voice to in these impeachment hearings. But it's the banality, to point to Hannah Arendt, it's the banality of evil. It's the fact that it happens a little bit, drip by drip, day by day, behind closed doors, without media coverage, and then it becomes a fait accompli. It's already a done deal. And we wake up, and suddenly we've been taken off the voter rolls, and our vote doesn't count, despite the fact that we thought we were going to have a say in this election. Or getting to the polls and finding out you don't have the right form of ID, so here's not even being told there's a provisional ballot, or being given a provisional ballot and not showing that your vote is actually going to count in the end. In the last month, we had the decisions in Florida where the Republicans in Florida are trying to put a bunch of financial barriers in the way of men and women, especially people of color, getting their voting rights back. Part of Jim Crow was to strip people of their voting rights if they had a felony. Well, that's, it's completely, I think it's a violation of your civil rights. Honestly, I think people should be able to vote in prison. I thought about this a lot, and I used to think that having your right to vote temporarily being suspended while you were in jail was fair, until I really reflected on it and realized that's not anywhere in the criminal code. Losing your right to vote isn't specified. It's like a $5,000 fine and losing the right to vote. That's not how our criminal statutes work. And it's a completely arbitrary, punitive measure to strip someone of their voting rights. And clearly, people in prison work. They are put to work, and even if you say their earnings aren't taxed, they are working for the state. So, their issues, their money, and going back and forth back into the prison system gives them a say in how the prison system is run, in my opinion. So, all of this is meant to eat away at democratic institutions and limit it to what the founders envisioned, which is a white supremacist patriarchy. Right? Just keep it with old white Christian men, and they get to rule over everybody else. And that is what I'm seeing with the Trump administration. It is Jim Crow embodied. And it's a constitutional crisis. And I know that, so impeachment is a political process. At the end of the day, they can go on and on about due process and reasonable doubt and standards of evidence. And there are all those conventions and those ideas. But in all honesty, there are no guidelines in the Constitution. The House shall have the sole authority to impeach. And if you you believe that, if you not believe that, but if you accept that as a premise, then the House can do its impeachment investigation and trial and hearings and charges any way that it wants. And I agree with that, because I think that is what the Constitution authorizes. I don't think the House is acting outside of its sole authority. On the Senate side, for all the objections I have to the way that the Senate trial is being handled, the Constitution does say, and the sole power to try impeachments will be vested in the Senate, or somewhere along those lines. It's a political process. It's not a judicial one. It's designed to strip someone of their political office, not put them in jail or fine them, deprive them of their property, or take away their assets. You're getting fired from your job, basically, and you're being barred from life. Like, wasn't there some sports guy who just got fired from baseball and barred from life or something for his cheating or whatever? It's like that. Because it's political, it doesn't have to be fair. And because it's political, it doesn't have to be just. I think it helps. I think the Democrats putting out, doing private depositions in order to protect classified information and then publicizing the transcript records that were declassified and holding public hearings created fairness and transparency. Inviting the president's team, even if they didn't decide to join at any stage, was fair. So they didn't have an obligation to be fair, but I think they were. This is the difference. The House does not have a moral or a legal obligation, even a political obligation, to be fair at all. But they choose to because they want to adhere to those norms. Now, given over to the Senate isn't interested in a fair trial. And that constitutionally is a power that is vested in them. But they do have to answer to the American people. And I don't think that the way that they are handling this trial is going to help Republicans going forward. I know because Donald Trump always thinks in the short term. He's thinking, I want this done by the Super Bowl. I've got an interview on the night of the Super Bowl, and I want my impeachment wrapped up by then. He's a tyrant. Remember this. If you think of Donald Trump, think of Henry VIII. A dictator after got hit on the head, right? It seemed like he had a change of personality after that massive accident that ended up bringing him close to death's door, and Anne Boleyn ended up having a miscarriage. She was so worried about the king and her own neck, probably, which was ironic because he ended up cutting through that a little bit later on. So he doesn't care about justice or procedure. He just wants the impeachment done with. And yeah, if they are going to complain there's no new evidence and then vote against witnesses, if they are going to rush through things and say, we don't have time to properly do this, Donald Trump will, if they acquit him, he will be acquitted, but they will have to carry with them the responsibility of explaining why they did acquit him forever, for as long as they're in politics. Yeah. Oop. So, what are people saying here? See what you are saying in the chat, because and that was kind of my thought. Like I feel, and I've said this before, that this next election, if Trump is reelected, we might not have the democracy we had under Barack Obama ever again. 8 years of Trump will probably be enough to stack the courts with white supremacist judges, incompetent white supremacists, and for the gerrymandering that the GOP, the white supremacist gerrymandering, to really take hold. Once the court establishes that you can discriminate against Democrats based on where they live and draw lines around them such that they are guaranteed mathematically to never have a fair shot at representation, If you say that that is a fair election, we're basically sliding back into a white supremacy government. So not much on the line in the next election. What do we got here? Impeach me for distracting your lovely stream with sex robot talk. That's okay. It was fine. It was worse than how it was back than the Nazis coming to power. How you think it was. So when I hosted, because COG was very, very generous in helping me with my study by giving me various pieces of furniture to sleep on while I was in the East Anglian area in the East, sort of that part of the country. I did offer to host him here in Germany, and we went to the highlight of the visit was going to the the National Socialist exhibit museum here in Cologne. If you are in the area, I highly recommend it. It is obviously emotionally draining, so you have to. Sorry, I've got an itch on my ear. This can't be a good look for me. But it is a very impressive documentation of what happened, particularly in our area, in the Cologne area. And there's the museum is in a building that was occupied by the Gestapo and actually had their cells in the basement of that Gestapo building. I think it was like from 1935 until 1942 or 43 or 45. I don't know, maybe. It was to the end of the war. It was like a pretty long time. They preserved the cells. You can go into the museum and walk through the cells that held prisoners from the area. And they have their graffiti on the walls. They talk about, they saw people being taken out and executed, and while they waited for their own executions. We also, as part of the tour, you go into the back of the building where they used to set up the gallows. This little sort of just courtyard area. Just completely unremarkable, except for the fact that that, especially toward the end of the war when the Nazis were losing and the Americans were on the cusp of invading the city, they just started taking prisoners out and doing massive, amounts of executions to finish off the evil people before the Allies came in. And so of all of that, I think you guys are probably, at least I was at least aware of, but of course being in the space where people had their last moments, it's different to be in that place physically and think about the horrors and the terror of what happened there than to just sort of sit in my room and talk about it on a more abstract level. The point, though, that I wanted to make was the museum also showed how the Nazis created almost like a parallel society in Germany. They started creating Nazi versions of everything, like the Nazi version of the teachers' union and Nazi versions of this workers' group and that workers' group. And it was almost like, there was the democratic normal, attempts, like for the democracy of Weimar, Germany at the time. And then they wanted to create this slowly built up, this entirely separate fascist structure that was a mirror image of what the social groups look like and society groups look like, but with fascism. And I'm just kind of keeping an eye on where the Trump movement goes, from diamond and silk and things like that into a more formalized system. What are people saying? I think Sibwolf says, I think I described the rise of Nazism as sleepwalking into fascism. Yeah. People tend to be focused on one set of issues and ignore or deprioritize these other issues till it's too late. Yeah, and I think that's also the problem, too, of people who do understand what's going on and care about it. If you start calling, even if you say, look, the house, fascist, people will tune out if they don't feel a threat to their person. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but I was taught how to be safe as a cis woman out in public or at night. I was told that if I was attacked, I should not scream out rape or murder or even help. I should just scream fire over and over and over. And that's because people will come running if they think there's a fire. But they won't necessarily take a cry for help seriously. And I think that's the same problem with fascism. Like, unless you think that there's a direct threat to you, it's easy to poo-poo these attacks on our democratic norms. And yeah, sleepwalking, I think, it's a super great analogy for that. I think this is why I vehemently oppose authoritarianism now. It is so easy when trying to deal with social issues to creep in. I agree. And I'm sorry, I know that people are going to be, there's a little bit of the authoritarian streak in some of the burners. Not Bernie, but burners. This whole, like, I am right, class is everything. If you just listen to me and you just put off your own liberation and we focus on class issues and material conditions, then if we just get everybody else, if we just spread the money around, racism and sexism and bigotry will go away. No, they won't. But Lonely Wolf writes, probability is one of the newer branches of mathematics to develop because it was heretical to talk about stochastic processes or chance, because God determines everything, not chance. Yeah, good point in terms of like a deterministic versus a probabilistic worldview. The other big challenge to probability theory in Western Europe, at least Catholic-dominated Western Europe, was, of course, the Catholic Church, who associated probability theory with gambling and put the kibosh on understanding a probability theory because it could be used to help people gamble. And that's religion getting in the way of human knowledge once again. The blank. You guys are talking about robots. What else is going on here? Republicans don't care about Trump. They care about a party's name to be smug with another impeachment. I think Mitch McConnell Republicans they don't care about Trump. They care about power. And this is what separates Democrats from Republicans, I think, fundamentally, is Democrats want power to do what is right for the country. I'm not saying that every single Democrat is a saint. I'm not saying every single Democrat has the perfect opinion on things. But in terms of thinking that government can be harnessed to solve people's problems and be used to redistribute the resources and wealth equitably, the Democratic Party will work on that. They do work on that. The Republicans want power for its own sake. I think they're quite happy if there is democratic legitimacy underpinning their wielding of power, especially Mitch McConnell. But if that went away and the power remained, I don't think Mitch McConnell cares. I don't think he cares about the Senate as an institution. I don't think he cares about the Constitution as a foundational document. As long as he is able to wield power within a framework, that's all he cares about. So if we have a tyrant in the White House that he is unwilling to check because they have political expedient, commonly shared goals, and he is destroying the Constitution, but in his he's able to keep his power and keep his Senate majority, I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares. He could, as long as he has his power, he will not protect the American people. We've seen him. So you can't count on white Republican men or women. And there are not just there are POC Republican Party members too, and I don't trust them because they're definitely helping with the white supremacy. Even if they themselves don't espouse the views, by voting for white supremacist power, you are normalizing it and you are mainstreaming it. And they have to own their votes on that. Republicans don't care about Trump. They care about, and then the Nazis between 28 and 32 actually set about creating their shadow state. They had a government infrastructure long before given the keys of power. Yeah, and what's scary about that, Sib, is that the Republicans don't need to create a shadow state. They have the white Christian fundamentalist evangelical people to do that for them. They have Liberty University. They have, what's his name, Graham, jerkface. They have a whole bunch of so-called Christian pastors who are willing to give them legitimacy with the imprimatur, is that the word I'm looking for? Or the cover of godly sanctioning. they'll give him a pass on his affairs and his spending money on sex with women and his lies and everything else because he is a means to an end. So unlike the Nazis, the Republicans don't have to actually build a shadow government infrastructure. They just need to use the Republican one that's already there. The white supremacist, Eurocentric, pro-authoritarian conflation of religious justification and God to trump democracy and define what is truly American, and that is white and Christian and cis male and heteronormative. And that is the future that Republican fascists want. So voting is going to be very important. I don't have a solution, guys. I'm just pointing to problems. Right. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for letting me know I got yelled. I was criticized by TJ Kirk. That really actually makes me quite happy. There are a few people whose scorn I welcome as evidence that I'm doing something right. TJ Kirk. Being criticized by TJ Kirk. The guy who said he would vote for Trump because he wanted to win a bet. Yeah, let's take that contradiction. June wants to criticize me about the Democratic Party when she says she basically wants to blow it up and hand over all power to Republicans. Yeah, I'll take that debate on. I'm really not interested, I'm not wounded at all by people who have no investment in the long-term good of our country. People who are interested in clicks, not understanding issues. Criticizing me for supporting and trying to improve rather than destroy the institution that stands up to the fascist party of America, which is the Republican Party. So, yeah, I will do that. I will stand up to the Republican Party by strengthening an infrastructure that brings together common values and focus and work on shared goals. Yep. All right, so with me being all self-righteous, I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. I am positive that Kevin and I will be doing another happy hour, maybe Monday night. It's hard to tell because of the time difference. When they start at 1 o'clock on the East Coast, that ends up being like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night for us. And if you want to do a show at 9, you're sort of right in the middle of the presentation. So it's a bit hard to both stay on top of what's happening and report on it when it's going on around you. We'll see if it's Monday night or Tuesday night. I don't expect the president's team is going to need 24 hours because they aren't going to make an affirmative case. They aren't going to present facts and evidence that dispute substantively the House manager's case or points. And secondly, they're going to bring up a bunch of stuff that's going to attack the Bidens that has literally nothing to do with the articles of impeachment. So they're just going to they're going to use it to spread more Russian propaganda. I think ultimately that's what the critique of and the assessment will be. So I don't know if we need to watch all of it to be able to do that. So it'll be Monday, Tuesday, whatever. And then I'm sure, of course, we'll talk about what happens next. Mitt Romney has... again, don't trust Republicans. Mitt Romney is signaling he wants to see witnesses, as is Susan Collins. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. I think I don't trust. There are no good Republicans. I'm sorry. People, we have this problem as Democrats, and I'm just over it. Democrats want to see the best in people. They want to hope people will do the right thing. And we look at instances when, like, John McCain once stood up and voted against Trump for all the other times that he did not do that. And Democrats really want to hope and really, really convince themselves that Republicans have a core of loyalty to the Constitution, and they just don't. They just don't. I want Susan Collins to prove me wrong. I want Lisa Murkowski to prove me wrong. I want Mitt Romney to prove me wrong. Bring it, guys. Bring it. Bring those 53 or 54 votes on evidence. But honestly, I think this is them talking. And when it comes down to it, they're just going to ram the trial through. Trump's defense is going to be Biden and 3 years of dislike. Yeah, nothing new. I agree. Garl Marg says, I'm perplexed by people like McConnell. They seem to care most about gaining and retaining power than actually using it in some cases. Yeah. Yeah. Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, is Machiavellian. He doesn't care about principles. He cares about power, because power allows him two things. It allows him to stack the courts with a bunch of white supremacists to maintain white power, a white patriarchy over the country for the foreseeable future. And he wants tax cuts for his friends. Boom. That's it. All right. I was saying goodbye. Sorry this is taking so long. It's been lovely talking to you guys. Thank you. Also in the chat, I want to again thank HK for the contribution. Thank you so much. And the wishes for a good day. I really appreciate it. And also to James, thank you so much for your contribution as well. Really appreciate that a lot. Have a good week. We will be back with the happy hour to talk about impeachment. I will be back next week, possibly looking at the end of the impeachment case. We'll talk about that some more. You guys are awesome. Appreciate your time and attention. So have a great Sunday wherever, whenever it is you are. I've been Christy. You guys have all been awesome. And we'll see each other again online pretty soon in the next couple days or so. Alright, see y'all later. Bye.